Hey Kick Punchers, welcome back. We're going to do another tutorial series on how to make this fun Hollow Knight character. But first I wanted to dive into the various ZBrush license options that you have at your disposal. So I went over to maxon.net and I'm in the ZBrush page and I want to go to buy, and they have a number of options. So you can do a monthly license where it's just 30 bucks a month, but billed annually, so you'll have to pay the 360 right away, or you can pay $51.91 a month, which comes with Redshift, which is just a renderer, or you can go over to perpetual licensing and buy a perpetual license for about 900 bucks. So I'm not sure if that contains all of the awesome substantial updates that ZBrush provided over at Pixelogic over the years, but for me, I'm just going with the individual pricing. The monthly $30 a month is what I've got. So just wanted to let you know where I'm at, and I think looks like there's student licensing available as well for individuals. I'm not sure how that all works, but I'm sure there's a discount there for those who are students. So yeah, that's ZBrush licensing. So we're going to make this character in this series, and I wanted to show you my shape blockout. So I've colored this in different shapes, and this is representative of maybe the different subtools that we're going to have. So we're going to have the horns and the head and the cape and the body, just how we're going to break our model up inside ZBrush. So for this first video, we're just going to do the basic blockout. I'm going to start with the Dynamesh sphere. Open that up. And as I look at my concept, which I can do a see-through up here by dragging this slider, I'm going to turn on my cursor as well so you can see that more easily. Okay, so now you can see that better. All right, so if we drag this over, we can see that the head is somewhat round, but it's actually more of a cube shape. So what I'm going to do is actually start with a cube instead. I'm going to come over here to the subtools and go to append, and I'm going to append a 3D cube. And then I can just delete. Actually, we're going to leave that for now, and I'll show you why later. So that looks great. We're done. Let's ship it. I'm just kidding. Let's shape this to be a little bit more indicative of our character. So if I come in here and grab this little square on the transform gizmo and squash it that direction, we're going to get that a little bit closer. And then obviously it's very much too square, so we hit Control D on our keyboard, which is subdividing our geometry. So you can see if I hit Shift D, it goes down to the lower subdivision levels, and if I hit just D alone, it'll go up to our new subdivisions. So Shift D goes down, and you can see how our poly count increases as I hit Control D to introduce new subdivision levels. And a way to see that in our tool palette is over here in the geometry drop down. You can see I have 4 subdivision levels, and if you scrub this guy, this is also going through the various levels. So Shift D goes down, D goes up, and Control D creates new subdivision levels. So we'll go to like the 3rd subdivision level. I'm going to delete the higher and delete the lower, and this is still too boxy, right? It's way too boxy. So what we're going to do is we're going to use a broad smooth. So if I go to my smooth brush, which is just, you can hit Shift and it'll turn your cursor to a blue circle, and hit X for symmetrical modeling. So Shift will switch it to blue, and if you just smooth, like scale this thing up by increasing your draw size, and you can do that by coming up here to this slider, or in your viewport you can hit S. And you can just scrub that thing left and right. So I have it as large as I can get it right now with the model's current scale. Holding Shift, I'm going to start smoothing my character. Then I'm going to rotate around to the back and smooth that. I'm going to smooth this. So let's do a see-through and see it's looking a little bit better, looking closer. I'm going to turn off this eye, which will get rid of that sphere. It will hide that sphere for us, and continue to smooth a little bit. And then the next thing I'm going to do is convert this from a clean topology to a Dynamesh. So in the tool palette, come over here to your geometry drop down and go over to Dynamesh and then click on the Dynamesh button. And you can see what it's done to our topo. So it's given us more polygons that are evenly distributed across the face of the model. And I'm still continuing to smooth. And because I have more polygons, it's not going to smooth as drastically as before. There's ways to get around that if you need, but for now, I think this is looking pretty good. Okay, so we've got the head done. And one thing I'm going to do first is I'm going to save my character. And I'm going to go to assets, tutorials. Oh, where am I at? Oh, tutorials, modeling. And then I already started a previous version, but I'm just going to version up to my next one. And so this is now saved. And you notice that that name was inherited in the top subtool. And that's why I want to keep that sphere here, because sometimes I like to rename my other subsequent tools to whatever I want them to be. And I don't want the head, for example, to be called Hollow Knight _002. I just want it to be called, and we'll name that right now. If you go to click on rename, just go to head _geo is what I'm going to call it. All right, cool. And then let's look at our concept. So we need to figure out a body. So I'm going to start with a cylinder for the torso. Come over here to append and go over to cylinder 3D. And we're going to use the transform gizmo and we're going to slide that down a little bit here. Snapping my views so that we can get a better proportion. Okay, cool. And then I want to draw out arms and legs out of this mesh, and there's multiple ways we can do that. We could convert it to a Dynamesh. So if we hit Shift F on our keyboard to show the polyframe, it's a clean topology. So we just hit Dynamesh and we'll make that into a Dynamesh. Make sure you hit X to have symmetrical modeling. And then I'm going to smooth this like I did the head a little bit by holding Shift. And then I'm going to grab the snake hook tool. And there's so many brushes here. If you know the roughly, I mean, you're not going to know the name of the brush that you want necessarily initially starting out, but because I know I want the snake hook brush, which is right here, there's so many of them. In order to kind of isolate the brush based on name, you can hit S on your keyboard and it'll sort of get rid of all the other brushes. And then we can more easily find our snake hook brush. I have those all set to my hotkeys. I use the snake hook brush quite a bit, so that one I have set to a hotkey to number 4 on my keyboard, just so you know. And what I want to do is drag out the arms. And that's all well and good, right? But we can see we have polygons stretching now, and that's not good. So what we want to do is come up here to click this button called Sculptress Pro Mode. And what this is going to do is it's going to generate polygons as we drag those out, as you can see. So we maintain a certain resolution of geometry even though we're pulling stuff out. And obviously these are too skinny, so I'm going to inflate these out using the inflate brush. I'm going to turn this off because I don't like Sculptress Pro on with some brushes. I don't like it on with my inflate brushes very much. I think it just does weird things. And we got a bunch of weird kind of polygons here now because Sculptress Pro is off. But we're going to re-Dynamesh by control, left clicking and dragging outside of our model and then letting go. And you'll see it's redistributed polygons where we need them. And then I'm just going to continue to smooth those polygons out. I'm going to go back to my snake hook brush and give him a bit of a neck. And then just kind of adjust the proportions on the torso just a little. We don't want him to be Hunchback of Notre Dame over here. So I'm using the H polish brush now to kind of push things. I really like the H polish brush. It's really good for hard surface, and I find I'm using it just more consistently for stuff like this. And then always just kind of accentuating the details and then smoothing. And I'm going to scoot those shoulders in a little bit. I want them to have less of a heroic posture, kind of, I feel like. Tapering down to the hips. And then just for the sake of learning, I think I'm going to try a different method to do the legs. And the brush I'm going to use for those is, oh, let's give him a bend in his elbow too. That's going to help. Yeah, that's helpful. Cool. The brush I'm going to use for his legs is I'm going to come over here and use the curve tube brush. And what this does is it draws out a tube from wherever you've clicked on your mesh. So if I click and drag right here, it's going to draw some of these tubes out. And it looks great, but we need that positioned more center in the body, and so you still have control. This dotted line is an indicator that you still have control over this geometry and what it's doing. So I can grab this top circle and move it wherever I want on the mesh. Anywhere I want, really. It doesn't have to be just on the mesh. But I'm going to scoot those back into place. You can even click these dotted lines and kind of shape it where you want it. Give it kind of more of an athletic feel. And then scoot it in just a little bit more. And then if I left click anywhere else on the mesh, it's going to get rid of that temporary spline. So you don't get access to that again, so just be aware. And I want to redynamesh this all together, so our topology continues by left clicking and dragging and letting go. I had that masked, so I just unmasked that. Now I'm going to do it again, and it's going to redynamesh everything. And so I want the legs to taper like I have the arms tapering to a point, because if you look at our concept, he doesn't have feet or hands, luckily, so we can avoid that detail. But he does have those kind of taper to a point. So I'm going to smooth these now. I have a large smooth still on. It's kind of working. It's got a square bottom, so we're going to flatten that out a little bit. He's got a bit of a pooch. He needs to go on a diet. Give him a keto diet here. Which I've been trying, by the way. I mean, I've lost weight, I'm getting tone, but I'm super ornery. Just so ornery because of the keto. Alright, so this is always kind of a tricky area to get right, I feel like, in the models. This little spot. We want them to be stylized, we want them to be kind of cartoony, so we're not going to hit any kind of anatomy, if you will, right there. But it is kind of just a tricky, we want to give him some kind of, pelvic creases, maybe a little bit right there. Redynameshing on occasion to make sure our polys are evenly distributed. I also want to make his pit kind of crease right here in his and I'm the brush I'm using for this, by the way, is the Damien standard brush, also known as the Dam standard brush. This brush is king. It's probably my favorite ZBrush brush, so I highly recommend it. I have that set to 1 on my keyboard, I think, because it's just excellent for detailing. We're going to use that to draw the little cracks in his skull, because I think his head is a skull. I don't really know. I haven't actually played the game. I'm not cool like that, but my kids love it, so that's why I make things, because my kids are cool, so it's got to be cool, right? All right, sweet. So, okay, our character might still be a little bit too skinny, so let's keep inflating, and awesome. I'm going to hit save. And next, let's go ahead and let's just draw out these horns, these crazy horns he's got. And we're going to use the same method as before with the curve tube tool. I'm going to alt left click to switch between my subtools in my viewport. So remember that, instead of having to come over here and click like this, just alt left click in your viewport. Okay, I'm going to drag my horns out, and just remember the diameter of that tube is going to be the diameter of that outer red circle on your cursor. Too big, too wobbly, maybe too curvy. Oh well. And if I go to the side, look, it's going to be towards the front, and we want it more centered on the head. So we're going to click this bottom circle. Awesome. And one cool thing that it does is it automatically masks the thing that you've drawn out on, so you don't manipulate that as you're making adjustments to this thing. And I want the horns to taper to be thinner at the bottom than at the contact point than at the top. Okay, awesome. Maybe kind of have them curve a little bit this way too, just a smidge. In fact, one thing I'm going to do here is I'm going to separate the horns so that I can maintain this nice smooth round shape on my head. And what I'm going to do is hit Shift F to show my polyframe. And you can see these are already separate polygroups, which means I can easily isolate these things by Control Shift left clicking on one of the points. I just isolated just these horns. And that other part isn't gone. If I Control Shift left click outside of these, it'll invert my selection to show me the thing that wasn't viewable. And then if I Control Shift and then just left click tap, it'll make everything visible again. So again, I want to split these into separate subtools, so I'm going to Control Shift left click on one of the verts on the horns, and then go over here to split and do split hidden. Okay, so now you can see I've had these separated out into separate subtools from the head. I'm going to call these horns _geo, and then the head is there, and this is the body _geo. Okay, awesome. And you notice that I still have the separate polygroups, because when I dragged out that cylinder, it gave it its own polygroup. And if I want to make this all one polygroup, just hit Control plus W, and now it's all one polygroup. These guys I'm going to subdivide by hitting Control D, because we're seeing, the reason I do that is because you're seeing these edges, right? You're seeing this faceting. We don't want to see that. We want it to be smooth, just like the head and the body. So if I hit Control D a few times, I hit it 3 times. If you come over here to the geometry, I have 4 subdivision levels. I'm going to hit Delete Lower, and then I'm going to Dynamesh by Control left clicking and dragging. So just to show you the polyframe, it was a clean polyframe, and then I've Control left clicked and dragged, and now I have the Dynameshed version. I'm going to pull using the snake hook. It looks kind of like a broken bone in the concept, and so I'm going to try to achieve that too, like up here at the horns. Okay, cool. Just adjusting the shape of the horns a little. And then I think the last thing I'm going to do in this video is I'm going to give him his eyes, his inset eyes. And they're just like a typical kind of skull looking eye. And I'm going to do that by drawing a mask, hitting Shift F to turn off polyframe. I'm going to hold Control, and you'll notice that it switches over to my mask pen over here. And with symmetry on, holding Control, if I drag on my geometry, it's kind of like I'm painting on it with a mask. I want his eyes to look kind of a little bit like he's determined, like he's ready to kick some butt. So I'm going to do that. And then one thing, I think I'm going to, let's cover the group loops of this. If I hit Shift F and then hit Control W now that I have this part masked, it's gonna make that its own polygroup, right? But it got rid of my mask. But it's not a problem because I have that now saved as a polygroup. So Shift F, if I control and click on that, Control Shift and left click on that, I can now isolate these different things. And that's cool because if I come over here to geometry and over to edge loop, and then in group loops, if I click this button, group loops, it gives me this nice these clean loops around this thing. And because my mask was a little bit janky, you can see that like we have to smooth these out just a little bit. If my geometry was higher poly, we would have less of an issue. But sometimes you can just hit group loops again and then group loops again, and it smooths those things out real nice. And the reason I've done that is because now I have 3 polygroups, right, or more. I have several polygroups here where the loops were made, but I really just want this inner polygroup. And so I can grab this by holding Control Shift and left clicking on one of the vertices within that polygroup. And then I can mask this by control left clicking and dragging, mask those eyes, okay? And then invert your mask by control left clicking. And now I have the ability, using my transform gizmo, I'm going to center my pivot by clicking this guy. And then I'm going to drag back the eyeball like that, the eye itself. And then smooth a little bit. Smooth, smooth. And then if I control left click and drag and unmask everything and turn off my polyframe, this is kind of the result we're getting. And it's a little bit too sharp. I want it to be smoother, rounder, so I'm going to smooth everything just a little bit more. And then I'm going to re-dynamesh this character by control left clicking and dragging. Let's actually up our resolution. We really need to do that. So I'm going to go up to like 224. You don't usually want to crank this too high depending on your real world scale of your character. Control left click and drag, and then Shift F. We got kind of a little bit of jankies around this thing. One of the cool things with Dynamesh is you can turn on this thing called Polish over here, and it'll smooth things out. You can see that it kind of like creased those edges a lot more and made them a lot smoother. I don't know that we want that for this character. I kind of want him to have more of an organic kind of feel, but that is an option if you need it. Okay, so I think we've got the base character pretty much good for this video. And in the next video, we'll go over like remeshing and posing our character, putting him in a nice dynamic pose, and then from there we'll extract out his cape and give him his rock base and his sword. So and then just continue further detailing. So this is this is the first video. I'm trying to keep these nice and short. I'm only going to do maybe 3 or 4 videos in this series. But if you're happy with the instruction, please like, comment, and subscribe. Give me your feedback. I'm still fairly new at this, and let me know how we can do this better. So thanks again, and we'll see you in the next video.